That's the next type of theodicy. The final type of theodicy is known as the best of all possible worlds. And if any of you are literary fans, this notion is mocked in a very famous book called Candide that was written by Voltaire. So he is actually making fun of the philosopher who argues for this theodicy. And the theodicy goes that, of all possible worlds that God could have created, right? The kind of God that we're talking about would only create the best of all possible worlds, right? And this is the world that was actually created. So this must be the best of all possible worlds. And there's some ways in which we can strengthen that by adding the notion of free will, by kind of blending all three theodicies together, right? We could say a world that has free will and some evil is better than a world that has no evil but no free will, right? Is another way of sort of phrasing it, right? That this was the better world for God to create, one in which, yes, there was evil, but we had free will in it, right? And so that's another way of viewing this. But if you're interested in a critique of this theodicy, I recommend you read Candide. It's very short and very funny. But basically, it's this young man who it's like a epic battle version of Meet the Parents. Do you guys remember that movie with Ben Stiller? It's just like really uncomfortable. Like all the worst things that could happen to him while he's trying to make a good impression on his in-laws, like those are the things that happen, right? It's the same thing with Candide. This guy is trying to get, the woman he's in love with back, and all the worst possible things that happen to him could happen. But he keeps bumping into this philosopher who says, but this is the best of all possible worlds. Right? No matter how much we suffer. So it's interesting, but there are potential responses to the problem, right? Is the general idea. So whether it's the logical problem or the inductive or evidential problem, right? Whether you think there's an inconsistency or whether or not you think there's just so much. Why is God allowing so much evil, right? Some evil I could imagine, but so much. And so there are ways of potentially addressing that. So there are three big ones. Again, free will, soul making, and the best of all possible worlds are the big ones. Sorry, I just want to make sure I don't miss any. All right, have you had Last Thursdayism? Yes, is that the one with cats? Doesn't the world get recreated every Thursday, Mason? I think I have heard of that one, if that's the one that you're referring to. Yes, good. Good. And there have been some sci-fi movies with this sort of effect, right? So people being fed false memories, right? And so if you don't have a memory of that, the implantation of those memories, you would never know, right? You would never have any reason to think, yeah, good. There are a lot of really fascinating religions. I'm also very fascinated in cults. So if you're interested, like I've watched like every documentary there is. So yeah, if you want to nerd out with me about cults, let's do that sometimes, because they have a lot of sort of similar tactics in the way that, we have to sort of maneuver and resituate ourselves to address a potential worry, right? And so you end up getting a lot of cults start by just taking pieces from existing religions and kind of piecing them together in an interesting way. And a lot of it comes from Eastern religion, right? And so because most people from the West aren't familiar with that, they're like, ooh, this is so fascinating and new. And it's like, no, this has been around for a long time. Yeah, the Nexium, like even non-religious cults utilize a lot of the same ideas. In the original Hebrew of the Bible, there isn't any mention of hell. That's right. So the Bible is made up of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but also know that the New Testament is going to be different depending on which branch of Christianity you're in. The Old Testament is also known as the Torah, right? Which is from the Jewish tradition, which predates Christianity and from which Christianity emerges. And yeah, so the stories and the depiction of reality and of God that you get in the Torah versus the New Testament are very different, right? And potentially, again, very incompatible with each other, right? So The God of the Torah, of the Old Testament, is very vengeful, right? So again, maybe not even the all good sort of attribute is emphasized here. Very much sort of salt the earth, very spiteful, very jealous. Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna, again, lots of variety even within any one given tradition. Good. Oh, not to mention newer branches of Christianity, which think there are levels of heaven. So I think like the Mormons think like Jews are second to the highest level. Like they just have, if only they would just believe that Jesus is the savior, then they could just get to the next highest level. So they've got it all divvied out into a hierarchy. Very, very different conceptions of the afterlife. Okay. If God is real, how are they able to intervene? How are they able to watch over us? Excellent question. Okay, so this has to do with a question about God's relationship to time and space, right? So the idea is that for God to have created time and space and time, right, God would have to exist outside of space and time. Does that make sense? You following so far? Okay, so to create space and time, God would have to exist outside of it. Otherwise, if God was in space and time, it would already exist, right?